Welcome to the House Education Committee. We are going to jump right in and take action on a couple of bills first. So, that being said, if you guys will pull out House Bill 2238, the most non-controversial bill in the House today. I'm kidding. All right. Committee, comments? Yeah, not everybody chime in at once.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this bill is about whether or not biological boys should play on biological girls' teams. A lot of people would like to make it about things that it's not, but it's about that one issue and that one issue only. So when you're voting on this, I'd like you to keep that in mind.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's interesting it's called Fairness in Women's Sports, not just fairness in sports or fairness in men's sports. The problem seems to just be one direction, and we're trying to protect those young ladies, and hope you'll keep that in mind.
Committee, I apologize for this, but what we're going to do is we're going to leave this bill open because we have a member who's running a few minutes behind. So right now, we're going to move over to House Bill 2138, the CTE Incentives Program bill, and we're going to work that one first out of respect for all the committee members. So my apologies, that was my mistake. We don't have to review those comments that were just made again. If we don't like to, they're already on the record. With that, if you'll open 2138. Comments on House Bill 2138. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. In discussion with some interested parties, we've come up with a minor amendment to this. The concern with this was, of course, that the payment might go to the wrong place. And so we've clarified that with this amendment. Jason's going to be handing it out, I believe. The intent, of course, of this is to get the kids the test paid for, but sometimes the test is given by the college and sometimes it's given by the high school. And so this just clarifies that whoever initially gives the test and pays for it is reimbursed. Would that be correct, Jason?
Jason, do you have any expansion on that?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, yes, the balloon simply includes community colleges, technical colleges, and the Washburn Institute of Technology as institutions that may receive state aid payments for reimbursement for paying for the cost of an assessment of a student enrolled in those institutions that obtains the career technical education credential. They would be reimbursed at the same rate as any school district under the bill as originally written.
All right. Questions from the committee on the amendment? Go ahead, Jason.
One more clarification. My apologies, Mr. Chairman. I would note that this is for students who are enrolled in high school grades and obtain a career technical education credential. So they would not be enrolled in the college. They would still be enrolled in high school, taking concurrent credit essentially through the community college, technical college, and Institute of Technology. And if the college pays for the CTE assessment, then the college gets reimbursed for that payment of the cost.
Okay, very good. Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does this have any impact at all on the fiscal note?
Jason.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have a revised fiscal note for a proposed balloon amendment. This would increase the number of institutions that could receive reimbursement for the cost of the assessment. So it's likely that the fiscal note would increase.
Okay. Just to remind me, what's the fiscal note on this right now, the way it's written?
Mr. Chairman, the fiscal note for FY 2024 was a general fund appropriations of $177,119.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, does this have a time limit on when the colleges, because I know that sometimes those tests can take a while. Is this like within a calendar year, or is it can they go back any amount of time to get reimbursed for those tests? Or I guess I should say, is the student required to take this test within a certain time period after completing high school? Or
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the underlying bill requires the State Board of Education to make the determination of payments each school year. So it would be each year the cost of the assessments that were paid for by the college of that year. There is no specificity in terms of when the student takes the assessment, when it's paid for, when they obtain their CTE credential, but presumably it would all be within the same school year.
Very good. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. And just to be clear, this is a one-time deal for each certificate. So if a student were to take the test and fail it, then there's no repayment. So once he's completed it, or she, then there would be a payment to whoever issued the test.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason, on page 2, the balloon with the definition of college, does that definition still only apply to not-for-profits and not-for-profit colleges, or does that language need to be included?
Mr. Chairman, the definition on page 2 of the balloon only applies to public two-year institutions. References the community college, technical college, or the Washburn Institute of Technology only refer to those public colleges, not any private or independent college.
Further questions for the maker of the amendment? Representative Haskins.
And this question is just for my colleague. More specifically, since we add colleges to this, should we add an amendment that includes the Kansas Board of Regents in deciding what would be industry sought credentials as discussed during the hearing?
I believe the list is, I believe there's 2 lists. There's a KBOR list as well as an industry sought list.
Representative, maybe if you want to talk about, I think it's important to note the compromise and how this amendment was reached with some of the other parties involved. I think it's a good thing to talk about real quick. If you'd briefly touch on that.
Yeah, that's fine. Last year that we passed this out unanimously up here and unanimously off the floor, and it failed to go anywhere once it was in the Senate. But some of the objection was the fact that the high school may be driving this and all, but the test actually was given by the college. And so then the college wouldn't be reimbursed. And so that's why this amendment exists in discussion with Heather to get that straightened out so that whoever actually gives the test is the one that's reimbursed. In reality, I don't think it would change the fiscal note. And that's just my gut instinct, is because these kids are taking the class. It just depends on who actually gave the test, and that's who will be reimbursed. Does that clarify things any?
Very good. Further questions on the amendment? All right. You may move your motion.
I move.
All right. Second, Representative Stogstill. Those in favor of amending House Bill 2138, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Opinion of the chair is the ayes have it. We are back on the bill. Further discussion? Very good. Representative Haskins, my apologies, sir.
It's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do not want to be a broken record on this, but I've slept since the last time we had this hearing. I just recall that there was a discussion that this would be governed specifically by the Kansas State Department of Ed, and that the Kansas Board of Regents was not involved in this, and Jason, I was just wondering if I'm interpreting this correctly, or does the K board still have a role, or is it just indifferent?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this would create a different reimbursement system for high schools and colleges who have high school students completing the CTE program. As it would be a different list of eligible credentials created by the State Board of Education, separate from any list that is currently out there produced by the Board of Regents.
Go ahead, sir.
And this is where I would just need guidance as far as how to move forward. I support adding the colleges, but I just know in past practices, the principle had been established that both the State Board of Ed and Kansas Board of Regents works together on such funding models, and I'm not sure how to best approach that, and I don't want to slow things down either.
No, I think questions are always good, and some of those questions will certainly take into consideration and ask for clarification on. I think that's totally fair. Further questions from the committee? All right. With that, the chair would entertain a motion.
I would request that we pass this out favorably.
Do I have a second? As amended?
As amended, thank you.
Second from Representative Estes. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right. Motion passes. We are still awaiting our esteemed colleague. So we're going to skip just a little bit here, and we're going to go ahead and do the hearing on House Bill 2081, creating the Aspiring Future Teacher of the Year Scholarship Program. So with that, my apologies, committee, for the switcheroo on the agenda there, but I wanted to make sure everybody gets a chance to vote on the other legislation. So with that, Jason Long, if you have the briefing on House Bill 2081, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2081 would create the Aspiring Future Teacher of the Year Scholarship Program Act. This scholarship program would provide 8 scholarships at a value of $2,500 per semester to qualified students. Those qualified students, as defined under the legislation, would be a resident of Kansas who is admitted to or enrolled in a college or university in a course of instruction leading to licensure as a teacher. As a condition of receiving the scholarship, each student would enter into an agreement with the Commissioner of Education with the following requirements there in the memo. They would complete the required course of instruction, obtain their teaching license, engage in the teaching profession at a Kansas public school, and teach for at least 2 years, and provide whatever necessary information to demonstrate their compliance with the agreement to the Commissioner of Education. You will note on pages 1 and 2 of the bill, there are sections of appropriations. These provisions appropriate $160,000 each fiscal year for the next 5 fiscal years for the scholarship program. This would go into effect this July 1st. So it would be applicable starting in the school year 23-24 for those students at a college or university going into education next school year. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Questions for the revisor? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. And with that, we will open up proponent testimony on House Bill 2081, and we will start with our esteemed colleague from the 20th District, Representative Mary Lynn Poskin. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. I must say I missed you guys not serving on education this year. Well, I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 2081. I'm just so delighted that we're having a hearing on this bill that creates the Future Teacher of the Year Scholarship Program. It was inspired by the joint House and Senate education meetings to honor the 8 annual members of the Kansas Teacher of the Year team. I remember listening to each of them and hearing their professional accomplishments and the personal stories that led them to being such committed and exceptional educators, and thought, we need more of you. And we do. We really do. Kansas is facing a teacher shortage crisis as teachers leave the profession and fewer students enroll in our teacher education programs. Cost to obtain licensure just continues to rise. This scholarship will encourage outstanding students to pursue teaching as a profession, lower their costs, and keep them in Kansas, where we need more of them. I urge the committee to work the bill, taking into consideration all stakeholder suggestions, and report it favorably for passage. The heart of the bill relies on these three principles. You guys figure out some of the other details, but number one, let's honor the annual Kansas Teacher of the Year team and their individual journeys to excellence. Number two, let's tell 8 aspiring education students that we see a future Teacher of the Year in them. And number 3, I would really like to maintain the merit-based scholarship model. Committee, thank you for your time, and I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move along to Lauren Tice Miller with the KNEA. Welcome back to our committee.
It's good to be back, especially on this bill. Chairman Thomas, members of the committee, I stand before you in support of House Bill 2081, and I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that we have submitted this testimony on behalf of Kansas NEA, but also the Kansas Association of School Boards. We do think this is a very positive step in helping us address the teacher shortage, but additionally, because it provides some additional financial aid to our students, it is our hope that it will reduce their student debt burden, which then also allows us to help, or allows us to retain them as well. Obviously, it doesn't solve our teacher shortage overnight, but as I said, it is certainly a positive step in the right direction, and we appreciate your willingness to hear this bill today and are very much in support of it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, committee will turn to WebEx. I believe we have Samantha Neal, 2018 Kansas Teacher of the Year. Ms. Neal, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. As you said, I'm the 2018 Kansas Teacher of the Year, and I am a 20-year teaching veteran in public schools. Most importantly, I'm the mom of 2 school-aged boys who attend Bueller USD 313 and 1 college son who is considering a career as a public school teacher. I'm writing in support of HB 2081. It's an amazing opportunity to pour back into the teaching community. It will allow Kansas Teachers of the Year and the Commissioner of Education to collaboratively select these 8 individuals who they believe show great promise as educators in the future. Becoming an effective teacher is not something that just anyone can do. It requires years of training, mentoring, and continued learning. We also know that students learn best when they have highly qualified educators who utilize proven strategies to engage those students in learning. We know these educators, if valued, remain in the profession and provide great contributions to the communities they serve. Having been recognized for my teaching as a Teacher of the Year, I cannot tell you how much it has meant to me that others see the hard work I do each day, how much I want my students to learn, and the effectiveness of the techniques I use to teach the content in my classes. This validation of work continues to be a driving force in what keeps me in the teaching profession. It's created a network of teachers that has become an educator family with which I can share ideas, brainstorm solutions, and plan for the future. I'm actually headed to Topeka tomorrow with a group of teachers for the KEEN conference, and it stands for Kansas Exemplary Educators Network. And I just think that Kansas has such a special and unique public teaching profession that connects us across the state. Student teachers already start out with a disadvantage because their internships are not paid. Student teachers pay for a semester of college so they can work a full-time job, which we call student teaching. This scholarship opportunity allows 40 teachers over the course of this time to begin their careers without so much debt. What a gift for them to receive such a vote of confidence from other award-winning educators. I think the state really has an opportunity to lead others in this front. With the state leadership, it would allow local districts to encourage businesses to invest in future teachers as well. I'm a dreamer. I'm an innovator. I see opportunity in my classroom, and this is something that I've hoped for a long time, is that we could start to see some sort of cornerstone in recruiting these, I guess, highly trained educators. I think that local education leaders and legislative leaders could really build something special with this bill. And I'm just thankful to be able to share that today.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you for taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much. With that, I will turn to Matt Lindsay, Kansas Independent College Association. He's late. Okay. Well, we will consider him written. All right. Very good. Questions for the Conferees Committee? Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is really on the fiscal note, and I'm not sure who best to ask these questions to, because I don't see anybody from KSDE, so who would be the right source? How about Representative Poskin?
Do my best.
I know you will. Could you give us a little history on how the number 8 scholarships were determined, not 12, not 256, like I would amend?
There are 8 Teachers of the Year finalists on the Kansas Teacher of the Year team.
Okay, all right. So that was the number, just correlation there. And the amount of $2,500?
That would be that it would be about $5,000 per year, and envisioned over 4 years, a total of $20,000. And when you look at student debt, when you graduate from one of our colleges, you could take that $20,000 right off.
Would there be any plans for amortization as tuition increases, the scholarship amount covers is less?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Feel free to amend if you would like.
You'll have to show me how. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. Further questions, committee? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also had a question about the fiscal note on here. So eight scholarships of $2,500 twice a year comes out to about $40,000, but it's allotted for $160,000 per year over 4 years. Is there, like, where's the additional cost going to? I saw that it does roll over, but then it looks like we'll have about a surplus after saving 4 years.
Go ahead. Well, the idea
Where did the
would be
hundreds-
that- the idea would be that the 8 students per year would end up drawing down $5,000 per year for a total of 4 years during a traditional 4-year bachelor's degree. So that's where the numbers come from. And it is a 5-year program, so it sunsets in 5 years.
So is it $160,000 per year?
Correct.
Okay, so where's that extra $120,000 going? If it's only $40,000 in scholarships per year, then what, does that make sense? You get my question? Am I
Because
misunderstanding?
it's 40 this year, 40 next year, 40 next year, and we're going to do it 5 years in a row. So we keep adding the group of 40, or we keep adding the group of 8.
Right.
Right.
So we add 8 more
The
each year?
numbers add up. Every year there will be 8. So 5 years of 8 scholarship recipients per year.
Of $2,500 each per semester?
Per semester. So really 5,000 a year.
Okay.
We would expect that they would attend full-time.
Okay.
So there would be there would be a different 8 each year. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, Jason.
Mr. Chairman, I just direct the committee's attention to page 2 of the fiscal note. There is a chart there breaking down the 5 fiscal years. In the middle of that chart, it says scholarship awards. And you can see for the first year, for those initial 8 scholarship recipients, it would be $40,000 in awards. For year 2, you would have those recipients come back for a second year, receive that $40,000, plus a new 8 recipients would be approved for that second year as incoming freshmen. And so you have $80,000, year 3, $120,000, year 4 and 5, $160,000.
Okay. So it's the rollover helps kind of with the administrative costs?
Scholarship each year they enroll in the course for all 4 years.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that for me.
I see that Matt Lindsay is here. Matt, would you like to take the floor and give us your proponent testimony, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies for my my tardiness. I was called in 2 different places at once, so I am glad to have a few minutes to address you. My name is Matt Lindsay. I'm the president of the Kansas Independent College Association. So I work on behalf of the 20 accredited not-for-profit colleges in the state and come before you as a supporter and proponent for House Bill 2081. Just to emphasize for us, teacher education is core to the mission of the private colleges in Kansas. It's always been that way. About a little less than 20% of the teachers every year in the state come out of the KICA institutions. We're proud of that. We serve a lot of districts, a lot of schools, both public and private schools. Those teachers are coming from our world, and we feel pretty good about how we do. If you look at the last few Teachers of the Year, you'll find there's a lot of alums coming out of KICA. And I mentioned in my testimony, this year's Teacher of the Year, Brian Skinner, is a Bethel College alum out of North Newton. Tabitha Rossproy is a Southwestern College graduate out of Winfield. So that's 2 of the last 3 coming out of KICA. And you go back through the finalists, you will find a lot of KICA alums in those lists. So we are excited about this approach. We think it's a good approach to increasing the way we value teachers, and we value high-achieving teachers especially. So thank you for the chance to address you, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you for that. More questions from the committee. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've seen a similar kind of chart like this with another agency where we actually out front gave them all of that money, and then they put that in a foundation and then drew 4% on it and got enough money. So it went on and on and on and on, not just for 5 years. Was there any discussion about setting up a foundation of a certain amount of money to support this rather than this be legislative every year?
If, Mr. Chair, if that question is directed to me, I'm not aware of any, but I was not the drafter of the bill, so I'd have to defer to someone else.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. White. Representative Poskin, can you please come up? Before we go, I was wondering, on behalf of my colleague, can you maybe answer the question related to, was this ever considered to be an endowment or a foundation?
It was not, and you know, that is something that could be considered. The idea was something immediate to recognize the Kansas Teacher of the Year team, and that would address the teacher shortage crisis, which maybe in 5 years will be over. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe not, but I'm always an optimist.
And thank you very much. And that
draft that as well.
You're adding a lot of work for me. All right, so I would, I do want to ask, just to go back, because another colleague brought this question up, looking at this table, if a student starts in academic year, fiscal year 2028, the 5th year, by sunset, do they still get the scholarship for 4 more years, or they just get it for the 1 year?
I believe it's set up, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that every student who is awarded the scholarship would get it for 4 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that
my understanding?
I couldn't find it, so I'm looking at the back of Jason's head to see if that's right.
That's awkward. Jason?
Chairman, while the appropriations only go through 5 years, the act itself does not sunset in 5 years. And so the eligibility and the awarding of the scholarships would still be effective beyond year 5. It would simply be subject to whatever appropriations are made after fiscal year 2025.
Representative Hill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see a provision in here if someone drops out of the scholarship, is that money made available to be awarded to someone else?
Jason.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the applicant in being awarded the scholarship has to sign an agreement requiring them to complete the required course of instruction as specified with the agreement with the commissioner. If they don't complete that and they don't receive any more scholarship of money, that money would still be appropriated to the Department of Education that they could appropriate. However, it is limited to only 8 scholarship recipients. And so the bill is not specific on whether or not the commissioner could then, in the middle of the year, award a scholarship to a new student, qualified student, could identify a new qualified student in the middle of the school year. Obviously, the money would be there and would roll over if it's reappropriated to the next year and be available for scholarship the following year.
Thank you.
My apologies. I do have a question. So reading through the neutral testimony, what we're seeing is their issue with this is it sounds like there's scholarships like this already in place, or maybe this might be an extension of a current scholarship. So could one of the proponents sort of expand on that thought, or just kind of help us understand or sort of respond to that testimony and let us know kind of what that means, if that's something that's already in place? Are we doing something extra here, or can we combine it with something else?
I will take that because I did address it in my testimony, in that I would like for all the stakeholder interests to be considered, and that, again, just the basic tenets I would like to see the committee hold in place, but I leave it to the will of the committee to work out some of the details.
Very good. Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Very good. Thank you. And with that, committee, we have written proponents. There's 5 down there, and then neutrals. We have written only from the members of the State Board of Education. So with that, any further questions for any of the conferees from the committee? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2081. All right, committee, with that, now that we're all warm and fuzzy, let's go back. We're going to start working again, House Bill 2238, Fairness in Women's Sports. I know we already had comments on the bill already. Further comments or questions from the committee? Yeah. Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to bring the new people up a little bit on this bill. This bill was before the House, before the Legislature last year. It was vetoed by the governor, and that veto was sustained. The people who came in and testified against this testified both as it being a hateful, bigoted piece of legislation that puts targets on the back of our transgender students, and also on economic development. Every Chamber of Commerce in the greater metro area of Kansas City sent us letters asking us, begging us really, don't pass this legislation. It will be an economic disaster for this area, for Kansas and the Kansas City metro. They let us know that the World Cup people had already told them, you pass that bill in Kansas, we will jerk the World Cup events from the Kansas City metro. We had every single one of the Kansas City chambers say this will be an economic disaster. And we pointed out, or I pointed out 2 days ago, I believe it was, that after contacting KSHA, there were only 11 transgender students registered out of the tens of thousands in the state of Kansas, that there were no complaints about any of those students, and that there were no incidents reported where they had any impact whatsoever on any sport or even any event in any sport. The people that have been the biggest proponents of this, and this is obviously being talked about across the country. And the people that came in looked to me like, we're not even from Kansas. The one person that submitted written testimony and did commercials again about this throughout the state of Kansas in this last year was not from Kansas. As far as I know, only maybe set foot in Kansas one time, and that was to support an ultra-conservative political nominee. And this will put us on the map with North Carolina and some of the other states that have passed this kind of hateful legislation. And I'm hoping that we will listen to the people who came in. I believe it was Teachers Association, Parent-Teacher Associations, United School Board, or United School Administrators, who came in and said, don't pass this bill. And I hope we listen to them. This is a hateful answer to a non-existent problem. And I'm asking you to vote no on this. Thank you.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't take time the other day when we had testimony to talk about this because we were kind of short, but some of you may know that my training is in reproductive physiology, and I do have a PhD in repro physiology. And I don't have one in technical management here. Thank you. And I wanted to address some testimony that was given the other day, just a part of the testimony that tended to talk about physiology of human beings. And there's a couple things that I think I would like to bring out on that, is that regardless of, and these are what we call transcription or cell division abnormalities that show up, and the individual talked about that. What they didn't talk about was, number one, the incidence of that, and number two, the expression of those abnormalities or transcription errors. The incidence is like 1 in 1,000 for the most common ones, and then they go up to about 1 in 50,000 for the least common ones. But what is more important to know is that each one of these abnormalities, excuse me, exhibit specific sexual characteristics, even though genetically, if you look at it, there can be, the only way you really know is to examine the chromosome structure. And so it is not, we get told that this is a physiology thing. It really isn't a physiology thing. And so the decisions shouldn't be made based upon erroneous information that there's a wide range of physiology associated with sexual characteristics. There really isn't. And the other thing I would like to address, as a reprophysiologist, we're very familiar with androgenic hormones. And these are actually the most powerful hormones in our bodies. And sometimes we look at those and say, well, it's just testosterone or just estrogen because we have that naturally occurring. But there's very few hormones that can go through cell walls and anywhere in the body. The androgens can. And if you remember right back, some of us are kind of old, I guess, but we remember back to when there were scandals in baseball and other sports for the use of androgen hormones because of the amount of differences that they make. And that is both estrogen and testosterone. They both have their own specific things that they do in the body. And I think, sometimes we take this as trivial. As scientists, we don't take that trivial. And we're very careful what we do with estrogen. We're very careful what we do with testosterone. And so sometimes I think we get caught up in the emotion of things and we forget the importance of the way our bodies are made and the effects that happen when we don't listen to that. So I wanted to give that testimony. I thank you for the time to do it.
Very good. Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize for not being at the hearing on Monday. My mother's in hospice, so I've been pulled in a lot of different directions. But anytime we discriminate against a group of people for one reason or another, I think is against an act of God. I don't know what drives people. We talk about physiology. We talk about a lot of things with hormones. My wife being a doctor, we've discussed this. We don't know what goes on in people's minds. But growing up like I did, and my folks during World War II could only find certain jobs after the war. My uncles, my dad were all military people, combat in Europe and in Japan. Came back and were discriminated against. I myself, playing high school sports, Sometimes I got to play, sometimes I didn't, and a lot of times it was because of different reasons that the coach wouldn't explain. It just happened. Saw my kids being discriminated against. Broke my heart. I didn't feel sad about it. I felt mad. I wanted to lash out. I will be voting against this. I feel it's unbecoming of the state of Kansas to put this type of characteristic forward to not only to Kansas, to the United States, but to the world. As the representative stated, we're going to be losing the 2026 World Cup if in Kansas. We're designated to pick up some games, and we're jeopardizing a lot more than what we see here today by this vote. And I'm very certain that this will be kicked out of this committee, and we'll be debating this on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Further discussion. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the typical legislative finding a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. I think we all came here to make this state better, to make our communities better. This doesn't do one thing to do that. This beats up on kids. As a teacher, there's no way I'm going to be part of beating up on kids, especially our kids that are the most vulnerable. I've seen students for, I think we're 30 years now teaching in my studio, and kids are different today. I think of one kid in my studio now, they're in second grade, they play football, they love beating up on their brothers. They also wear sequin sandals sometimes. They're very proud of that. Parent thinks it's great, and the parent just embraces who the kid is. And it's not our place to be doing this to kids. And this whole week has been really hurtful to families and kids across Kansas. And I'm not just talking like left-wing liberals. I'm talking all ages, all political spectrums have contacted me about this. And they're concerned for kids. And whether you understand trans or not, nobody's asking anybody to understand, accept, change your personal position. But bills like this cause kids to kill themselves. And that is shameful that we would participate in that.
Thank you. Further discussion. Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with respect to my colleague with his doctorate in that area, my doctorate is in higher ed and in business, so I defer to, and thank you for your testimony on that. But I want to just take the opportunity, being a freshman here, to remind from my perspective that the reason I came on is to represent what I believe is the purpose of a republic, that is to not forget that the state is only as strong as the individuals, and the individuals are only as strong as the state. And once we sacrifice that, then we no longer have a republic. We had 100 people against this bill, 100 individuals against this bill testify. We had less than 10 who supported it. We had 100 individuals, less than 10 support it. Even if you do not accept the theory that the state is only as strong as the individual and the individual is only as strong as the state, I just ask you, why would we pass a bill when our own Office of Attorney General says that this will be challenged in the courts, and that we know that the constitutionality, which is to protect both the state and the individual, will be challenged? The bill is not good. We may discuss what should be fair on sports, and we're all in agreement that men should play with men in sports and females should play with females. But to say that this is not about that or only protecting that, then why do we need a co-ed category? Who is to play in the co-ed category? What individuals are to play in the co-ed category? Folks, we've tried this several times. Why send it down the road knowing that it's going to be crushed in the courts? Please don't move this forward. Let's show that we can end this here and save the individuals of the state and the state tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Representative Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when we vote on this motion that we pass it out favorably.
Is there a second? Second from Representative Murphy. All right, roll call is in order. Those in favor, please raise your right hand. Those opposed, please raise your right hand. Or left. Motion passes. All right, let's move on, committee. Let's pull out HB 2224. With that, I will turn it back over to the reviser, Jason Long, to give us a briefing on House Bill 2224. Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2224 amends one education statute which governs the minimum amount of time for each school term. Under current law, a school term has to be at least 186 days or 1,116 hours for grades 1 through 11. It is a shorter time frame for grade 12, 181 days or 1,086 hours. For kindergarten, the school term must be at least 186 days or 465 hours because state law does still allow for half-day kindergarten programs. This typically equates to 6 hours of instruction per school day for grades 1 through 12. The bill would increase the total school term hours to 1,560. It does give school districts the option of either conducting 195 school days of 8 hours of instruction each or 156 school days of 10 hours of instruction each. And that new school term length would apply for grades kindergarten and 1 through 12. So there would no longer be a half-day kindergarten program would no longer be permitted, and seniors in high school would have to attend for the full school term under the provisions of 2224. This would go into effect if enacted on July 1st of this year, and so it would be effective for the 23-24 school year. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Questions for the reviser? All right. Seeing none, thank you, Jason. Let us turn to the proponents section of the bill. With that, I will turn it over to our colleague, Representative Riley. Welcome to this side of our committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And feels like David against Goliath here. So I would appreciate, I do appreciate the fact that I have an opportunity to talk about this. And again, my testimony is in your packets, so you can take a look at that. As a review with the reviser, I placed in there the 2022 Kansas statutes, briefly going over exactly what the reviser just talked about, that, you know, the 186 days for pupils, so many hours for the school year. Just wanted to bring that out, get started with our discussion. Second thing is, thankful to the research. I had them go back to ground zero, to where in the history of Kansas, where we came from and what was considered. And so you should see this document in your folder. If not, it's out on the S drive. Their report of, since Kansas started, you know, we have pretty much been the same hours that we started with way back when there was log cabins and one-room schoolhouses. Now and then from then on, we just kept taking hours away, hours away, hours away, days away. So lo and behold, my actually just make it easy, 109 extra days that I'm adding to the school year, not talking about the differences in time right now. And so what I was laying out with that is putting back on the 4 days for teacher in service. And I'm putting back on again the 5 days for parent conferences, or if they want to, if we had bad road conditions, that would be put back, they could use them for that. What I want you to look at is basically, since the beginning of when we started legislating all this it was always the minimums. We were always dealing with the minimum amount of hours, the minimum amount of days. And so when the school board on September 15th made their decision of how many hours or how many days that their school year was going to be, they always were recommending the minimum. Always went back to the minimum. At any time, they could have added these extra hours if they wanted to. And so, again, going back to research, I asked them to calculate from last year all the school districts and how much time that they put in for their school district. And so, since it was so long, it was like 31 pages, that's on the S drive. You're welcome to go look at it. For every single building, it tells the amount of minutes that they calculated out. So from the beginning of the school day, taking away a lunch, to the end of the school day, how many minutes? So then I did, it's not in your calculations, but you're welcome to do the same thing with the Excel spreadsheet. So as an average, it came up to be 437 minutes. And then you take about approximately a 30-minute lunch away from that, and you end up with about 407 minutes. That's over the whole state for last year, what they recommended. Now, we can make a side note here and talk about some of those schools are not doing well academically and why that is all about. We could talk about funding, and so I think that's where the main discussion is going to go with this. We're not funding this enough. But again, I would like to go back to basics and look at a day. Because if the school board is always setting the minimum, are they looking at, going back to those basics of are they teaching, if you had a perfect world and you were teaching, reading, writing, math, social studies, science, how much time would that be? Could you do it in a 4-hour day? If you did it in a 4-hour day instead of our current 6-hour day, does that mean we would need less teacher time? The contracts would be less? I mean, the main thing that we taught, that you'll read in the proponents or the opponents is that, it's going to cost more. Well, if we cut back on our hours and we had a 4-hour day instead of a 6-hour day, does that mean we would get a third of our money back and it costs a third less? No, because you have a whole lot of, when you start talking about finances, it's not just about hours. So let's look at an average teacher's school day, school week, right? So the way it is right now, we're looking at a 6-hour day, 5 days a week. Math says that's about 30 hours, right? 30 hours a week for a full-time teacher. In addition to that, when I was teaching, we usually had part of our contract is before that school day, we'd typically come in, 15 minutes early, we'd stay 15 minutes late. So add that to the contract. But then on the other side of that, you'd have to take away typically 1 period a day, whatever that time would be, for your instructional planning. So 6 hours minus 1 period. And so I don't know where that came up for as far as an average teacher, because I can tell you I always went in an hour and a half early. I always stayed an hour and a half late, and that was, I would come in before the school year would start, and I know a lot of elementary teachers, I mean, they're there a week before their contract times, and they're in there setting up their classroom. So typically, teachers' contracts are for like 186 days, right? And then they start taking away things from that for parent-teachers conferences and et cetera. So I will admit that, the teacher salary is a big part of this. But if we were to look at, what Stephen Covey has said, about, always look at the end, from the beginning, look at the end in mind. That's not what I wanted to say. Yeah, begin with the end in mind. And so what is our true reason for teaching school? It's not to employ teachers. It's to figure out how to get students to the point that they're good citizens, they're working adults. That's what we're looking for. So in your packet that I left you today, there's going to be a little discussion about, there's no real reason for having teacher contact. And so I put in your folder a article that just came out yesterday. I saw it last night, and so I put it in your packet. Came some research from Oklahoma about it really does make a difference of how much teacher contact that you do have. I mean, we saw some of this during COVID where because of we had to go to Zoom, we had, teachers, we were doing part of the day, some students were going in for a part of the day and some were going to the next day. I think that teacher contact is important. Now, if we're let's talk about the 8-hour day. So we do our basic skills, and then we add on to that the extra hours for extracurricular activities or whatever extra things that you have. And so we have an 8-hour day. So, school boards could increase their contact time. Now, let's talk about fixed costs. So, administrators are going to still work 18 hours a day. And the staff and the custodians, they're going to still work their 8 hours a day regardless. So I think that students need more hours of contact with the teachers, whether that is class time or even if they have choices for other extracurricular activities. So, the discussion comes up, well, how do we lower, there's going to be more costs for air conditioning and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Well, maintenance is going to be maintenance. But I think that, you could lower some things like in Kansas, if you started after Labor Day, where typically here in Kansas, we've always traditionally, not traditionally, but the last few years, we've always started in the middle of August or beginning of August. And so we have all these air conditioning costs and all that kind of stuff. We could start after that, have less costs kind of thing. So, and then talk about they wouldn't get as much food. I don't know where that came from because I think most of the kids get their 2 meals a day, so they get their breakfast and lunch, so we wouldn't have to feed them dinner or whatever just because they worked an 8-hour day. So all I'm saying is school boards could do this now. School boards could make this decision. I'm just putting this out on the table because over and over again from the history of Kansas, we keep always doing the minimum. And I don't think that's right for students. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Representative. Questions for the conferee? Representative Sanders.
How did you come up with the amount of extra days and extra hours?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The days came, like I said, the extra 9 days came from the possibility that had been taken off in the last few years of the 5 days of accountability for in-service day, or 5 days for either in-service, 4 days for in-service, and I think it's 5 days for weather days. We call them weather days, but they could be whatever you want to use them for those extra days. So those days over the last 15 or 20 years have been taken away. I'm putting them back on top. And then as far as hours, I'm just talking about teachers working a full day, 8 hours, 40 hours a week.
Representative Haskins.
Representative Riley, got a question for you, sir.
Yes.
First, I want to say thank you for giving me appropriate evidence and ammunition to inform my kids they need to do their homework. And so If they didn't, I would say, hey, we can pass this and you could be doing it for a lot longer. And it does get people to work. I just am curious, and I guess I'm, again, a broken record, is have you ran this through the Kansas State Department of Ed, and have you compared your estimates of the number of hours that teachers work to any type of research or anything? So have you talked to KSDE? What are their opinions? And then I feel like your number of hours for a teacher is pretty light on a daily basis.
Mr. Chair, I'm not quite sure the ending comment of light. What does that mean?
You said they, if I may, you said that they work 8 hours. That they have an 8-hour day full.
Right now it's 6.
So what do they do with the other? Okay. Have you talked with KSD? Let's just leave it at that question. Have you visited with KSD?
No, I have not, but I think you're going to hear some of that from the opponents that are coming up. So I've talked to school board folks and to try to get their opinion. And of course, everyone in this committee, I'm hoping I was trying to get this out to everybody so you could take a look at it and look at it. I like your point, and you know, we used to have study halls at the last period of the day, and that would be another option to put on the table for that 8-hour day.
Further questions? Very good. Thank you, Representative. With that, we will turn to the opponent's testimony. With that, I believe we have Leah Fleiter here from KASB. Correct me if I said your name wrong. Just kidding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to be here today. We do appear in opposition to this bill. Our legislative policies support the State Board of Education's constitutional oversight of Kansas public schools and the constitutional authority of locally elected boards to manage their districts, and so we feel this bill conflicts with that. We also note, as was referenced by the proponent, this does seem to add a significant number of days to the school calendar without making a legislative commitment to fund. I was reading the fiscal note, so at least $36 million, and there's more to that. So we can't support this bill unless those concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Lauren Tice Miller with the KNEA. Welcome back to our committee for the second time.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas, members of the committee, for the opportunity to stand before you today in opposition to House Bill 2224. We believe that under current law, school districts have the freedom already to decide how to meet the statutorily required number of hours, which is 1,116. And under this bill, it seeks to extend the school year by 444 hours, or a total of 55 and a half days. We believe that this eliminates local board authority to establish what works best for their students in their school district, and we believe that this is ultimately a mandate for a year-round school calendar. There have been other models in other states where they have adopted year-round school calendars, and they have failed, largely because they don't accommodate the demands of a modern work-life balance. The other issue that we see with this bill is that we believe it further perpetuates the division that we have seen over the past couple of weeks between public and private schools. There's very little evidence showing that a longer school day actually results in higher achievement. And if that were the case, then why wouldn't this be expanded to all schools, public and non-public? Thus, we see this as an opportunity to incentivize more parents or families to choose a non-public school who may have more of the traditional school calendar schedule, and over a public school, which under this bill would make it an 8 to 10 hour day year-round. Lastly, as it was mentioned, yes, money is a concern. We've seen this discussion happen all session so far, that money is very much the key to a quality education. And we believe that it jeopardizes the fulfillment of the Gannon decision if additional funding is not provided for these additional days. So with that, for these reasons, we respectfully urge you to reject House Bill 2224, and I would stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you so much. Next conferee is Jim Carlskent, United School Administrators of Kansas, and former office mate. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be here again. You know, I hate to come in opposition to things, but United School Administrators, we cannot support this House Bill 2224. As had been indicated before, you know, it increases the school year by 45 hours. It's an unfunded mandate, and you know, if there is an intent to go to a full year school year, you know, let's try it in a pilot program. You know, it's been tried in other places, but you know, maybe there's a niche here that would work. But to spread it across 286 school districts, I talked to a couple of 2 or 3 superintendents and, you know, talk with them about this, and we're talking millions upon millions of dollars across the state that this would increase. You know, and I know there's been a great deal of conversation in especially the education committees this year about student achievement. You know, we feel like that, you know, student achievement can be improved, and it needs to be improved. You know, no one is going to argue that point. But I don't feel, you know, like extending the day and the number of days would accomplish that. You know, it would just be like asking you and this group right here to sit in committee meetings for 8 to 10 hours a day. How would that be? You know, I think I have that answer because I sat in the chair that Representative Hill sits in. So, and it gets to be a great deal. But you know, there are ways to improve student achievement if that's the goal. You know, and you know, I do think that, you know, we need to work on that. But one thing this doesn't, it takes out parent-teacher conferences and also professional learning opportunities that are currently in the school year. You know, we need that communication with parents as administrators and teachers. We also need that opportunity of professional learning, which is a key part. So with, I don't have any further things to add other than what's been added by other conferees, and you don't need to hear that again. So I will sit down and be available for questions if the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, questions for the conferees? Representative Hill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just kind of a general out there. You know, I think it's naive to think that we're tops in the world in academic performance. I haven't looked at those numbers real recently, but what do other countries do as far as length of school year, days within a school year? Have there been studies done by the State Board of Education to see whether what different countries or different areas are doing and whether they're effective or not?
It's a good question, Representative Hill. I don't know if I have a good answer. You know, I'm aware that in some countries and certain cultures, mainly some of the, you know, Eastern countries, they have longer days, longer school years. The culture is certainly different. There is, from what the reading that I've done on a limited basis, is there's a great deal of stress on the kids, a great deal of stress, you know, suicides and everything else because there's such pressure on the kids. Not only for the longer time spent, you know, required for study and spending in class, but also the pressure that's put on them to produce, you know, positive test scores. So I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but I don't have anything other.
Well, I think some of the question is, do we look at other cultures and other school days and see what it is that they do different, and particularly those that are generally considered to be performing better on standardized worldwide assessments?
Do we? In some phases we do. You know, Representative, you indicated something that I guess is kind of an issue with me, and that has to do, you mentioned standardized tests. And, it concerns me that this, I'll say the legislature, both sides, and many others across the state, base the performance of kids, how we're doing based on how schools are doing, based on a test that's given one day. Your kids have bad days, and I hate to say this because I've been an administrator in both the parochial as well as the public schools. Too many kids don't care about that test, and we are being judged on that because kids don't care. I think there's other ways that we could measure academic achievement, but one tiny snippet of time on that one day is what we base. How are you guys doing? And granted, we do need to improve at least the perception and how the kids are doing. But if you look at ACT scores, Kansas is doing much better than it's viewed as how the overall state is doing. Are they doing great? I wouldn't say great, but they're probably in the upper 2/3 of the states based on test scores of the number of kids that are taking the test. And I guess my point is, when kids want to do well on a test, they're going to do well. I know in certain schools, and this was more during the No Child Left Behind era, when, and it's still doing it in some places now, but kids were prepped for, okay, tomorrow's test. We're taking the test tomorrow. Go home and get a good night's sleep. Get a good breakfast. They bring in things. They have these motivations, almost bribes, for kids to do well. And I know too how kids felt stressed, like some of the, making sure they would do good. So I don't know if I haven't probably answered your question.
Well, I certainly didn't want to get into a discussion on testing because the only reason I put standardized test in there is a way that we can look internationally. I think we could also put in there the rubric of saying how kids perform that come to our universities as compared to kids that are locally raised. I mean, there's a lot of different rubrics that we could use to try to identify whether our children are doing better or worse than other countries. So I really wasn't trying to get into testing so much there as I was trying to get into what do we do as a department, what do we do as organizations to examine those countries that are perceived at least to do a better job of education. And you mentioned the Asian countries, but I think a lot of the European countries are also perceived to be more effective in educating kids and what they do differently. And if there's things that we can learn from that instead of just trying to come up with excuses why we shouldn't look at it.
Representative, I'm not making excuses, but I'm trying to, I think we need to look at the full picture, and I agree with you, that I think there's certain cultures, even cultures within the United States, that group of kids, they do better on certain tests because I think the motivation comes from home.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hill, or Getz, sorry, my apologies. We all look alike when we don't have the Mr. Chair. We do look alike. Yeah.
It's just a comment, maybe a question, but I remember seeing in the K-12 Budget Committee, basically, and not to tie this back to test score, I think your heart is student achievement and getting more of the teacher time so that students achieve. And if we can test that by seeing how a student is achieving by a test, but the main thing that was a comparison point by a state assessment test and their college readiness and career readiness, it was that that state test showed pretty even with their career and college readiness. And so it was, and that was from the state. And so I just wanted to say that test is being used, and then it has a kind of an equalizer over against then real life in college of where a kid comes in at. So it's really just a comment that we can't just do away with that because a lot of times the school is using that as an argument of these tests prove where the kid's actually at. If you want to respond to it, you can, don't have to.
Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for Superintendent Carlskent.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we're talking about achievement, and it seems like all of our discussions here and in other committees here are talking about student achievement. We have a group of kids that have gone all the way through school over the last, that are now juniors and seniors in high school, that have gone to school with years and years of unconstitutionally funded schools, and then the pandemic. Would you think that that might have some kind of an impact on our achievement scores?
Representative, that's kind of a loaded question. Yes, it does. And I know, having been in this body, I worked on that formula in 17 and 18 to bring back the funding and phase it back in. We spend a lot of money on schools. I'm not going to argue with that, and no one else in this building will either. We spend a boatload of money on schools. There have been a lot of different issues about, related to student achievement. And I do think, and back in, bring some history back to this, in 17 and 18, when we created the new formula and it was funded, and the Supreme Court said in 17, okay, you're on the right track. We put $300 million towards it. You're on the right track, but not enough. We had to come back in 18, and we had to correct it, and then we phased it in over a 5-year period, and then with the CPI that, as we're dealing with now. So, yes, to answer your question, it does impact it. Do we get a lot of money? For what the other side would say, yes, we get a lot of money. But, I'll also take you back, for those of you that are probably new to this, back in 2018, in March of 2018, there was a study that was paid for by the legislature, almost $250,000. It was called the West Ed study. Dr. Lori Taylor was the individual who gave it to us. And it was the K-12 Education Budget Committee and the Senate Education Budget Committee. We met one day. It was in, I think it was either March or April of 2018. And I mean, when she gave her findings that to get to a 95% graduation rate, how many more billions of dollars would have to do, I mean, this place was shaken because of what it was. And can Kansas afford it? I don't know. It takes a lot of money, and based on what she said, it is a lot of money. I'm keeping you guys too long. I apologize for digressing.
Thank you.
Never worry about it, Jim. It's always good to hear from you. Representative Haskins.
Ms. Fleiter, just as your head went down there.
Just stretching.
This is just a question because I don't really know the answer and I'm curious. I know that the Kansas Board of Regents a few years back encouraged that post-secondary institutions reduce their requirements for a bachelor's degree from 124 credit hours to 120. That's not the question there. The question is that they had a trend of we need to reduce the number of hours to complete a degree so we can get our students into the workforce, and that there is demand for expediting these degrees.
Okay.
Have you heard any demand for less hours or more hours from the parents at those schools?
For more hours or less hours in the school day or in the school
In
year?
comparison to like the Kansas Board of Regents has done, it's like we need to get them out.
I have not heard anything from any of our members as we've traveled around the state. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Further questions? Seeing none, very good. That closes. Oh, sorry, Representative Younger. I apologize.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just sitting here thinking because there's a lot of good discussion going on. And
don't do that too much. It hurts.
I know it hurts my head. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, funding is important. There's no doubt about that. I think we all agree to that. but there's so many other things that we could be doing. How we could support kids. I made the comment before when we talked about health care for kids. Our kids in Ulysses, we started the school year last year with 4 nurses. And for most of our kids, that was the only health care they received. We ended the year with 2 nurses. You know, the kids aren't getting the health care. They don't have the social services that they need. You know, those are things that we could be focusing on and really helping students across the state of Kansas, helping the families, because the families, so many of them are I don't want to say dysfunctional, but they need help, and they don't know what to do. And that becomes, you know, the schools aren't failing. Schools are a microcosm of society. And as a society, we're struggling. And that's what we need to focus on. So, thank you.
Very good. Further comments from the committee or questions? All right, very good. We also have opponent written testimony from 3 folks. It should be in your folder. With that, committee, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2224. Anything else, committee? Representative Ruiz.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I noticed that you had final action on bills heard today. Due to the non-controversial nature of HB 2081, I move that the 24-hour rule be waived and that 2081 be moved up for the committee final action.
Happy to entertain that motion. Is there a second from the committee? That is the Kansas Teacher of the Year Scholarship Bill that we just heard today, by the way. Is there a second? Representative Miller. Very good. Discussion. All right. Committee, if we'll hold just a second, I believe Representative Partial is coming back down to help us vote on this. If we could just sit tight for 2 minutes, that would be great. Yes, this is the motion to move to suspend the rules and work the bill. Yeah, discussion on the motion. Seeing none, go ahead and close on your motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move my motion.
Very good. Is there a second? Representative Miller, all those in favor of suspending the rules and working House Bill 2081, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Very good. We are on the bill. Discussion on the bill. Y'all, yeah, we're very quiet today. Let's stand at ease for just a second, folks. I apologize. I want to be fair and make sure everybody gets a vote on this. While we're waiting, just a quick reminder, y'all, our last day in committee is Tuesday. We have about 4 or 5 bills still left to work. We will be working a couple bills tomorrow. We also have a couple of, one hearing tomorrow and then a presentation on graduation rates from Randy Watson. So figure I'll just cover all that while we're here. We will not meet Friday, ever. We have the high-density at-risk bill that we're going to hear on Monday, and then Tuesday is just going to be for whatever bills we have left over, depending on how much I bloviate that particular day. Could be a short meeting, could be a long meeting, so we'll see how that goes. So, and that was just a comment, so no need to respond. Very good. That's okay. Any further discussion on House Bill 2081? All right, I will look to the committee for a motion to pass out favorably.
Mr. Chairman, I move that HB 2081 be passed out favorably.
Is there a second? Representative Stogstill? Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Very good. All right. May you disperse, go forth, and tell everybody that in Ed we can pass 3 bills and have 2 hearings in one day. Thank you, committee. With that, we're adjourned.